Hi, I'm Dale Peterson, and welcome to the Unsolicited Response Show. This is our February month in review episode, so we're going to talk about the three big stories of the month and then do wins, fails, and predictions. And helping me out this February is Bryan Owen. He is a security architect at OSIsoft, one of the good guys in the industry. We know that OSIsoft is in the process of being acquired by Aviva, and I have a lot of questions for Bryan, but they wouldn't be appropriate right now. We got to wait for this thing to close. So I'll spare you that. I'd hate to see you mess up an acquisition by saying something you weren't supposed to. But welcome to the show, Bryan.
Hey, thanks, Dale. Great to see you here virtually, and sure missed you last month there. So, yeah.
Yeah. And people take note of his Twitter following, or his Twitter there, at Bryan's Owen with an S in the middle there, because he's a great follow on Twitter. He uncovers a lot of things that I don't know about, so I find myself retweeting him a fair amount, but it's easier if you just follow him. Well, with that, Bryan, we've got a lot to talk about this month. We've got a number of, let's say, incidents, and some we might cover quickly because they've been beaten to death, and others we can spend more time on. But of course, we have to start with Oldsmar, which happened at the beginning of the month, the hack of the small water utility there, where they attempted to release a bunch of lye into the water supply, and really not much actually ended up happening because they saw it, they stopped it, and such. So I've written about this. I've been on other podcasts talking about it. Why don't I let you try to pull some gem out of this? Is there something about Oldsmar that you haven't heard that you think about? Or if not, you could maybe approach it. What do you think will happen because of Oldsmar, if anything?
Well, that I guess I had thought of a couple slightly different perspectives. If I could inject those first, is
Sure.
it's first the press conference kind of thing at the beginning was I don't want to say completely unique, but it was it was kind of an eye opener, right? You don't see that approach too often, and it almost maybe kind of flashed back to Norris Kedro, where they really were out in front with a press conference kind of briefing right at the very beginning. And the other one,
before you jump on past that, I was shocked by that. I even asked reporters to try to find out why they held one. There was no impact. There seemed to be no reason they needed to do it. But I was just shocked. If I was advising the company, I wouldn't have advised them to do it, because now Oldsmar is going to be in everyone's presentation for the next 10 years. I'm just curious, do you see any win in them doing that? I mean, it was nice for the community, but I don't see a real win for the asset owner.
Well, you kind of picked up on my vibe there. I'm really, sometimes you have to take one for the team, and I think they did the right. I'm not sure a press conference the way it was orchestrated was, they probably have some lessons learned there, but still to get out and get the word out to everyone, it was very effective. And yeah, I look at it exactly that they took one for the team. It may not have been the very best for them, as you suggest.
So what was I'm sorry, I interrupted you. What was your second point?
Well, to my knowledge, this was the first time we've seen a follow-on advisory that actually dug into the process and process control aspects and mitigations. Most often, all we're seeing historically are IT-centric kind of advice, and finally we're seeing things like, hey, there was other things in the process, other procedures and mechanisms that water plants have to prevent these kind of disasters. So really a first of what I hope is a pattern that repeats into the future. It reminded me of the kind of things you would discover in CCE is, hey, you can hack the HMI, but it's only going to get you so far. So
yeah, that was the one thing that there was a little bit of tap dancing on there was redundancies they talked about in the press conference that would have prevented it. Were these redundancies alarms and such programmed into automation that could have been changed by a hacker who was skilled and wanted to do it, or were they actually people going out and testing things periodically that would have flagged it long before it caused a problem? Yeah, I agree with you. Those are both things that I think are notable about this. I was thinking about what, if anything, would be the results of this. It seems I did a article saying it was like a Rorschach test where everyone is saying Oldsmar shows this, and with whatever point you wanted to make, you could point to Oldsmar being a reason why your point is valid. But the only thing I could really see coming out of this is I know Chris Krebs, Director Krebs, had a real, I guess, high level of motivation trying to help state and local governments and small utilities and such. And I think this Oldsmar, on top of that direction that CISA was already going, I think this Oldsmar almost guarantees that they'll get some funding in the next budget. That we'll see, that will be one of the results, is that we'll see some level of funding going out there. How effective it is, we won't know, but at least they'll have some more resources, I think. Do you see any follow-ons or any result of Oldsmar to the industry?
There's been an awful lot of discussion renewed about remote access. I see on different forums, whether it's the SANS community or on Twitter and so forth. So I'm hoping that that will lead to some better practices. It's ICS, naked on the internet. We've been beating that horse for over a decade, and maybe something will finally happen. I mean, CISA got emergency, or I think they have authorization now to do some subpoenas if they can't, find out, if they see like a Modbus or something on the internet and they hit a brick wall of the ISP. I think they have a legal means now to dig farther, but I would have thought the industry would have eradicated these kind of practices a long time ago. But maybe this will push us to actually do it.
Yeah, that was one of my early comments on this, that I actually think it was a lost opportunity, that should have been the point that CISA drove home. They just should have said, if you are an asset owner of any size, the first thing you need to do is make sure that your system is not on the internet and any remote access is two-factor authentication. Full stop. CEOs, boards ask that question. If you don't get a good answer, you're borderline negligent. I don't know what words they could use, but I was hoping they would pound that home, but it ended up just being one of many things that came out of it.
Yeah, I read your post on that, and I couldn't agree more. So often, every one of these incidents ends up with a laundry list that's impossible for anyone to act on in a reasonable manner, way, like showing it to an executive kind of thing. You got to really hone in on the critical few if we're going to make progress, and we'll whittle away at it if we're able to do that.
Especially at the small organization like an Oldsmar, municipal water is one of the hardest challenges. There's just so few resources that everything you do has to be high impact, or you don't have the resources to do the laundry list. Well, we've got a lot, so let's move on. And this one I really need your help on, because SolarWinds, when in our back and forth and preparing for this, you said we should talk a little bit about SolarWinds and the analysis that's been going on. And I must admit, for me, SolarWinds is something, I heard about it. I saw that it was extremely difficult to detect and stop from an asset owner perspective, because you're getting legitimate software from a legitimate source. And so I kind of tuned out a little bit to it, because it was one of those things where I didn't really feel like I had any suggestions. But you've been tracking this, and I guess as a provider of software, it's more interesting. What are some of the takeaways you've seen in the analysis that's happened since the initial announcements.
Right. I'll try not to repeat. I had a podcast with Andrew Ginter, and that just went public. But yeah, I've been following this really closely. It's certainly interesting from a supplier perspective. But even watching all the testimony last week, the part that I keep seeing missing is that it's almost as if people want to believe that the supply chain threat can just be totally eradicated and move to zero. We've been dealing with vulnerabilities for a long time, and people accept that there will be vulnerabilities. Why is the back door so much different? And so when I listened to the testimonies and so on, I didn't think there was enough emphasis on the defensive measures that really need to be in place, because no software is perfect. And now that doesn't mean there's things that SolarWinds doesn't need to do better. Of course they do, and that's a great discussion too. But I think the failings of backdoors, ingress and egress filtering. Why was that such an easy target for these top highly defended networks that the adversary was after? So in the testimonies, I will say Ron Wyden zeroed in on that, but he was really one of the few that really was trying to focus in on that element of this this attack.
I think that's an important point, because that's a little bit what I was feeling, was this idea of, if I'm advising an asset owner and they're saying, how do I stop this? I couldn't give them an answer that would credibly stop it. Like, oh, you should evaluate, you should pull apart everything you buy from any vendor. That just seems impossible. But maybe it is focusing on where this should have been detected, especially in these high value, highly sought after targets. Maybe that is a message that hasn't come through enough. What did you think about some of the non-government analysis, the Microsoft analysis, and some of the others that have looked at this?
Oh, this is what made it so interesting to track the findings, because the security research community just was all over this. The reversing of the domain name generation, and tagging of, okay, who was a second level target and so forth. That just kept me on the edge of my seat, going, whose name's going to show up on their next. And it was really fascinating. And then, FireEye wasn't the only one. You have to give Palo Alto some credit. They sounded an early alert too to SolarWinds, but they didn't. It wasn't the kind of smoking gun like, hey, there's malware. It's like something's operationally not right with Orion, and that was like a month before FireEye pinpointed it. So these security companies, hey, hat tip to them. They are pulling their weight, and without them, I think our government would be in a much worse of a pickle than they already are.
Well, it's a bit off topic, but it almost ties into what the government should and shouldn't be doing, because we've now seen an example where FireEye in our community, Dragos, and others have tremendous capabilities of incident response and analysis, and yet the government will say, call us and we'll come in here and do it. I'm not sure, when something is available for a fee and a for-profit company is available to do it at a high level, I'm not sure why the government should really be pursuing that. And I think this just is a really great demonstration that commercial public companies, with probably some exceptions. I would imagine there's some teams in NSA and other places that are really elite, but the ones that are going to go out and help the companies, they're probably have a better access to talent by paying for it than going through the government.
Yeah, I hope I don't regret saying this, but I think that's exactly right. We could look at this incident and say the private sector security companies are doing it better. They're sharing it better. They're detecting it better. Einstein was a total bust, and yeah, maybe it's time for the government to focus its energy in different ways and really leverage the private sector security community a lot more.
And wouldn't you say they're also reporting it out better? I again didn't follow this as closely as you, but the articles that I saw that I was most impressed with were the early ones from FireEye, the Microsoft. I didn't really see anything coming from the government of similar quality. But again, I didn't read everything.
Yeah, there's love to go all around there, but
Okay.
certainly FireEye, CrowdStrike, Microsoft put out some super quality materials, but um, I would say the CISA alert that was very clear to people early on, hey, you should disconnect SolarWinds, wait for a few days and we'll come back more. So there was some direct guidance, uh, and of course, why this always happens over Christmas drives me nuts. But that seemed to take a few weeks, but they got up to speed quickly and then ruined a bunch of people's holidays. But yeah, that's par.
Well, I guess that clear message should be applauded, since on the old smart thing, I said they need to be clear. It sounds like in this case, you give them credit for being very clear as to what asset owners should do once they put that out. So that's good.
Yeah, and
Okay.
SolarWinds gets credit for turning around some updates pretty darn quick. So, and I think there was a lot of government folks vetting those updates. So, yeah, there was a lot of good teamwork there.
Yeah, I haven't really seen SolarWinds beat up that much. It's, a little bit, but I think there's sort of a, for the grace of God there go I, or whatever that quote is. People say, I'm glad I wasn't subjected to that as a vendor. Maybe you shouldn't answer that as a vendor, but
Well, the hearings were pretty, there was kind of a bimodal distribution. There was folks that had some respect for the victim, and then there was folks that, really were out for blood. So I'm not sure which way it'll go down when they get to legislation, but it does appear that there's most of the congressional folks are leaning towards some kind of legislation. So.
Okay. Well, let's hit we've got one, and then just one that happened on the last day of the month. ERCOT, the cold snap down in Texas causing the large scale outage. This was not a cyber incident in the sense that it wasn't caused by any malware, hacking, or anything like that. But I just wanted to flag it because from my standpoint, this should really be a wake-up call to our community. Everyone thinks that cyber threats are the biggest danger to critical infrastructure. And we see over and over again large impact events, oftentimes weather, but sometimes other things caused power outage, water outage, all that sort of thing. And this idea that we should raise the flag and there should be this huge concern about cyber threats, I think it got a bit of a reality check with this cold snap, in that, yes, we need to worry about it. We need to do a lot better, but it is not the most likely cause of a large scale incident, because we have these incidents every year in various regions of the world and the country, and we don't have them with cyber incidents as of yet. So to me, it was a kind of a wake up call saying, hey, maybe push down this. This is the most important thing. This is the only thing we need to worry about, and realize it's just one of many if you're part of the critical infrastructure.
Exactly right. And certainly as a Californian, we've been through several seasons now where power has been unreliable because of climate-related extremes, um, and some of that also climate-related has been flooding with the Oroville Dam failure and so forth too. So these crises, when we look at the risk management plans that are public for a lot of these power companies, and you see cyber down at say number 5, um, it it's based on solid analysis. There's a reason it's not number 1 because it just doesn't deserve to be there yet.
Yeah. And then the last one that came up, and I really haven't read the report in detail. I've just read the executive summary. But we saw on the last day of the month, February 28th, Recorded Future put out a technical document that then was picked up by the New York Times talking about a China threat actor targeting the Indian power sector. And specifically, they said 4 of the 5 regional load dispatch centers, 10 units in total, and a couple of other critical infrastructure elements. So there wasn't any Recorded Future. This was really important. And Rob Lee really, I thought, did a good job highlighting this. Recorded Future didn't tie this to a power outage that occurred in India. The New York Times did tie it to that, but as of now, there's no evidence that they have caused, let's say, an outage or a negative impact to the critical infrastructure. But they're in there digging around, preparing, perhaps probing. We don't really know. But I think that's a report I'm going to read more closely. Did you get a chance to look at that yet? Did you have any early thoughts on that?
I'm, just coming off of reading Nicole Perroth's book. They tell me how this is how the world ends. You would, at least my impression is, hey, the gloves are off when it comes to attacks on critical infrastructure, and we need to we all need to prepare for this kind of thing. It might not be the quote Pearl Harbor effect. It might simply be posturing, geopolitical politics, making people doubt their decisions and so forth in for leaders of countries. But nonetheless, this is the world we live in now. Is cyber is a domain that almost all nations are playing in, and as we found out in Ukraine, they're not afraid to play around in power grids.
Right. I wouldn't go so far as saying the gloves are off. I'd say that everyone's training for the fight. Yeah. And I did a paper on this. It was called, I think, Preparation and Persistence. And I think we're seeing a lot of that, of people building up capabilities of getting beachheads into organizations they might want to attack further at a later date. But outside of Ukraine, we haven't seen a lot of intentional attacks to take down the critical infrastructure. Now, maybe I'm missing some that were averted, but at least the ones that have been public, it's still been pretty minor. Now, if it ends up that they're able to substantiate that this cyber incident caused the power outage in India, that would be a very different situation. But we shall see. Any last thoughts on this before we move on to the next one?
I probably should defer to you, but just to try one more time is
sure.
the idea that it's okay to attack and target critical infrastructure is maybe I'm not giving the ethics of other nations enough credit here, but we know that there's rules of engagement that we would like to be followed. I think this is a big part of what Brad Smith was trying to say in his pitch about SolarWinds. Hey, there's got to be some ethics and things put off bounds, hospitals and power grids and so forth. But we know that there's nations active in this space, in cyber, that do not have those lines of demarcation. They don't have rules of engagement that at least are evident. So
I could go on and on about this, but Nicole said she's going to be on the show at some point. She's doing the big ones first, the nationwide ones. But once she gets through those, I hope to get her on the show, and we'll dig into that some more. Let's get to our next topic. So a lot of incidents and events there in February. I guess another thing that caught my attention this month, and it was not a big story, but Ruben Santamarta, who's now with IO Active, is just someone I've been impressed with for over a decade now. He's the one guy in the industry that I've wanted to come to S4 and present that I haven't been able to convince to come over yet. So every year I hit him up. He's really good. And his approach is a little different. When he's trying to find vulnerabilities in the product, he actually rarely gets the product. He just gets the firmware. But his level of accuracy and the ability to find the vulnerabilities and create the exploits is really impressive, given that he doesn't even have the product in hand. And he put out a two-part series called A Practical Approach to Attacking IoT Embedded Designs that I thought was really noteworthy, because he approached the companies he looked at were TI, Qualcomm, Nordic Semiconductor, and Expressive, and he looked at the SDKs. So he was saying, I'm not going to try to attack each one of these IoT devices. I'm going to attack the SDK that they're using, and that way when I find an exploit, it will work across maybe hundreds of different types of devices. I thought that was real serious. As someone that probably buys some libraries from people and such, did that grab your attention?
It did, and in part because I try to read anything that Ruben publishes. I'm a fan, like you are, dating back from some of his presentations at Rooted. But that looking at those SDKs and IoT devices, my mind went straight to Joe Weiss and how he's been leading this charge that sensors are really the next frontier in Ics security. And Ruben's work would tend to point that direction. The work he was doing with these SDKs, the laundry list of vulnerabilities found, and most of them start out with the phrase a local attacker with access to this, that, or the other thing, will be able to do this, and usually amounts to taking over the device. And I think that's the future of Ics security, right? We've been so worried that we have to protect from the enterprise and business networks down into the control networks, and especially as things move toward cloud services, the attacks are going to flip, and they're all going to go from the devices upwards. And we learned that with smart meters, even that, and IO Active did great work there, tearing those things apart. That once you get into one meter, what can you do next? And that's the worrisome part for us.
Well, I had a couple of thoughts on that. That's really interesting, though. What you're saying is maybe that the cloud becomes harder to get into, and you start looking at the soft target of the sensors and the IoT devices out there. They're going to be more than sensors, right? They're going to do some basic level control as well. But what I really liked about this was the idea that he was focusing his effort on a highly leveraged target. I really appreciate, I don't cover many vulnerabilities, but when someone, for example, gets a protocol stack that everyone's using, or a library that's everyone's using, for example, if someone found something in the OPC-UA protocol or the Triangle Microworks DMP3 stack, that's why we put some of those in the pwn-to-own competition, or at least recommended ZDI include those. So I really like the idea that he's looking at the SDK. Maybe we're not going to be able to secure every one of these IoT and get them to do the right thing, but at least let's get the underlying system really looked at. So I thought that was very interesting. But then I was a little bit like you in the sense that, yes, if that's what people are going after and these are low-cost devices, the idea of securing them in the future just seems impossible. And maybe we need to start actually thinking, what are we going to do to live in this world where they're not secure? So assume that they will be compromised rather than saying, we're going to put this massive effort together to make sure they cannot be compromised. I'm almost given up on that, but maybe I'm too pessimistic. Do you think we have a shot at securing these things?
Well, your instincts are right that these commonly used SDKs are worthy of rigor and focus to get things right. The work that Adam Crane does to, hey, let's step it up and use memory safe languages and so on would be a huge benefit. So there is low hanging fruit there, but we'll never get out of the need to do monitoring, especially in ICS, because the idea is just use the functionality against us, right? That's the forever day kind of concept. So we'll always have to do the monitoring.
Yeah. Okay, let's get one last story before we get to wins, fails, and predictions. And this is one, I don't know if you have a comment on it, but to me, I had the interview with Bayshore. There was a story that basically GE bought WorldTech. They got the WorldTech product. I think it was OpsGuard. Boy, I should know that. OpsShield. I should get at least the product name right. OpsShield. But they developed this product. GE did. They were trying to sell it as a product, as a certification service, and essentially they've given up on that. They have now said, we're going to hand this over to Bayshore. We're licensing the technology. GE can still use it, but they've pretty much stepped back from that product market. And this was interesting to me because I see a lot of the other vendors getting more into the security products and services. So this is GE having been in there taking a step back. And I was trying to think, I haven't really seen anyone be successful with selling security products as a large ICS vendor, with the exception of maybe Ovation. Emerson's Ovation, they're used to be called Security Center. Now I think it's Power and Water Cybersecurity Suite. They managed to cobble together a bunch of products and resell them at a very high price. I thought it was doomed to fail because it was essentially a 3x markup to get this bundle from Emerson when you could just buy it yourself, but that's been successful. My feeling is that the ICS vendors are not going to be successful selling products, that their bigger chance is selling services, managed services, whether it be detection, whether it be vulnerability management, perhaps incident response, maybe even managing firewalls for them or something of that nature. As sort of you're not a mainline ICS vendor, you sell the historian, the data processing, the data analysis software, so you don't actually sell the SCADA or the DCS. What do you think, though, of the future of a SCADA or DCS vendor selling security products or services? Is this something that's going to be successful?
I think there's certainly room for it to be successful, Dale. I think we often think of the space as being asset owners and suppliers, and this systems integration space in the middle is been I don't want to say ignored, but it deserves a lot more credit. I know there was a couple S4s where there was large contingencies of systems integrators at S4, and it really made me feel great that they were participating in the space. But they haven't participated in with the security focus that I would have hoped, and things like seeing tools come forward and so forth. Right now, it looks like the best work is coming from the dedicated ICS security companies. So, maybe GE's move was a good move for everyone at this point in time. But there's room for everyone to be successful if they commit to it.
I think of the product side, the hard part about the product side is if you think about, even if you're an integrator, so if you're selling the products, it's one thing, but the security piece is such a small fraction of the overall system, and it adds a level of complexity and difficulty that to date they've just not wanted to embrace. So we've seen many cases where, I mean, you and I talk about this with OSIsoft a lot, where the vendor puts out all these recommendations and then it gets installed and they're essentially ignored. Even sometimes you could take like a Yokogawa, Schneider Electric, a Honeywell, they say, this is how you should deploy our systems, and then their own teams go out and don't deploy them that way because it just adds complexity. So I think, in my mind, the product sale is a harder road for these vendors because it's such a small amount of revenue in a bucket that's quite large. But the services, I think, are interesting because once you talk about annual recurring revenue, it's a different bucket, that's a different team. And I could see that being something that's much more attractive to the company, that they could build an effort around that. I think the biggest challenge they're going to have with the service, though, is what happens when there's conflict? What happens when there's a problem? So let's say Honeywell has a service and the Honeywell product wasn't deployed properly. Does the Honeywell service person then call out the Honeywell team? Or if there's a vulnerability in the Honeywell product, will they have the maturity to actually criticize their own system to give true value? Or will they always say, no, it's okay, it's not a big deal, holistic, all's good? So I think that's going to be the bigger challenge. But I think from a money standpoint, the service could be very attractive to an ICS vendor.
Yeah, I mean, there will always be companies that are heavily vested in one particular supplier, and then yes, it'll make sense. But I think the real edge goes to the firms that can service the entire umbrella of what they're going to find at a plant, and that just really would be hard for any one particular ICS supplier to service everything.
Yeah, that's a really important point that I didn't hit, is you have the multi-vendor situation. So are you really going to want vendor A monitoring vendor B's system? That could be a big problem. Okay, well, let's move on to wins, fails, and predictions. I actually didn't have a prediction this month beyond perhaps that prediction I made earlier that Oldsmar is going to lead to the government funding, let's say, smaller state and local security projects, putting some money aside from that. Did you have a prediction for this month?
So my prediction is a little bit of inspired by my brother, who, while Texas was having its power outage, Oregon was having its same kind of thing. My folks were out of power for almost a week, and my brother was like the 12-volt man running around with a generator in the back of his pickup, powering up people in the neighborhood and stuff. So, I think where I'm going with the prediction is that we are going to see more and more neighborhood level, community level driven responses to these kind of things, and whether it's as sophisticated as microgrids or whether it's generators in the back of pickup trucks. I know this isn't an ICS related thing, but I think it kind of speaks to what we need to do in ICS. We need to have communities of volunteers. The ICS security research community absolutely hit it out of the ballpark in February. That even this one that was just announced with the Rockwell Logix series. The research community, there are bright lights right now, and we just need more of it and more volunteer work going forward. Help your brothers.
Okay, and how about your win? What was your win for February?
So I guess I kind of combined my win into that
Okay,
into that
well, that's fine.
prediction. But yeah, the winners were the research community as well. But the
Okay,
prediction is that's going to turn into more institutionalized kind of community leverage.
okay. Well, I think the organization is going to be shocked by my win since sometimes I'm not so nice to them. But my win is actually for INL, Idaho National Labs, and it's on two fronts. One is that make sure I get this right, but Zach Tudor received the Career Achievement in Government Award from the Black Engineer of the Year STEM, and that was really fantastic and well deserved. Zach is really an important guy to our industry. He's always positive. He's always bringing people together. He really has a lot of patience, and he's been at it year after year and just consistently makes progress. So I was thrilled to see that. And the other thing that INL did that I was impressed with was, and this might have happened last month, but they got the CCE book out. I gave them a hard time on stage a couple of years in a row that, hey, where's more? And we had a big podcast where I, said some things I liked and didn't like about it, but getting that out there to the community is really changing the discussion, in my opinion. So kind of a double win for INL. How about your fail or loss for the month?
Yeah, congratulations, Zach. Perfect win there, Dale. Thanks. So that I think the fail has to go with this SolarWinds 123 intern thing, and I have a lot of sympathy for what must have been going on with those guys after 5 days of giving testimony and being ground down and worn down. But to blame an intern for a mistake like that is zero class. And you know me, I'm pretty tolerant and respectful, but that just didn't seem right to me. So let's blame the process, not the people. So
yeah, it's a unfortunate fail for the month, but I agree with you. My fail, after I was so nice to INL, I have to be a little mean to the ISA Global Cybersecurity Alliance, ISA GCA. In February, they came out with their 2021 objectives, and it's just so disappointing to me. This organization, I thought this organization was an opportunity to take all this great work that they're doing in ISA 99 on the 62443 standards and have a way of bringing it to the market that was lively and energetic and would really leverage that hard work that's been done for decades. I mean, they've been at this for a long time, put out a lot of very long, detailed content, and the objectives were underwhelming. They were crosswalks, they were training programs, and the other thing, beyond being underwhelming, and quite frankly, some of them were repetitive to objectives that weren't hit in 2020. So I thought they were playing small ball, and also they tended to just repeat the challenges or the problems that the standards have. They're going to take these really long, complex set of documents and create a new big, long, complex set of documents. And so I had a lot of hopes for that organization. Not much has happened. I know it takes a while to start up, but I just thought if they achieve everything they wanted to do in their 2021 objectives, I'd be underwhelmed if they got everything right. So my loss was the 2021 objectives from GCA. And don't get in trouble by commenting if you don't want to.
No, one of the things I think you're known for is throwing out some nice critique that represents ways to stretch and do better. And everything I've seen from ISA is really a large group of very passionate people on this topic. So I have little doubt that your words will be heard and people will step it up and respond to the challenge. So.
Well, that's the show. I want to thank my guest, Bryan Owen of OSIsoft. If you heard something that you had a question or comment on, you can record your question. Go to dale-peterson.com, and on the right side, you'll see record your question. Click on that and speak into your mic. Or you can send questions, comments, suggestions for guests and topics to s4@digitalbond.com. And I'll talk to you next time. Something warrants an unsolicited response.